Hello again, everybody. I'm here again with TC McCarthy. This has been the long promised show that I promised TC, but we never get to it because we just talk too much about geopolitics and we just got a little carried away with the Russia thing. By the way, still no. Yep, the site can't be reached. The connection was reset.
Oh,
so yeah, I still can't get to the English version of the Kremlin. Anyway, today we're going to talk about TC's writing career and some of the books that you can check out. We have discussed it tangentially on prior episodes, but this time this is for TC to talk a little bit more about the writing he does, which is actually, if you're into geopolitics, military science fiction, it's extremely interesting. So TC, if you just talk about how you got into the writing scene, kind of very high level biography, it'd be great.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be a literary author. That was my first love.
You wanted to write about cancer and divorce in middle age?
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's really what I wanted to do. So I went to University of Virginia. It's a good story. I may have told this before. Sorry if I did. I was at high school graduation and the speaker was George Plimpton. And in case people listening or watching don't know who George Plimpton is.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, I think he is. He's he wrote this book, Paper Lions. He was a sports writer, I think. He's a writer, very well-known writer who is also
he's a writer who would actually if he wanted to write about professional sports, he would become a professional athlete.
Yeah. They made a movie about Paper Lions where he actually played for, help me out here, was he Patriots or the
I don't know that much about him. I just know it was pretty amazing what he did.
But he's got this pompous, almost British accent that's completely fake, I'm sure, because he's from New England, if I'm not mistaken.
He reminds me of William F. Buckley.
Exactly.
They talk the same way.
Same kind of intonation and everything.
So mid-Atlantic accent, right?
Yeah. So I go up to him after the graduation and here I am, 18 years old, obviously much younger. And I said to him, Mr. Plimpton, I really loved your speech. Look, I all I want to do is be a writer. Can you give me some advice? And he goes, yes. Become a banker or a lawyer. There are far too many writers as it is, and you'll make far more money if you go into those fields. And so I was devastated.
Did you tell him how unstable banking was?
No. I was devastated.
Or that you have to work 120 hours a week? Did he tell you that? No.
And so I went to college, University of Virginia, and with bright eyes, went into the creative writing department. And they had, the head of the department was I can't remember his name now, but back then he was like a big literary figure. And you had to submit writing samples and then do an interview. And so I submitted my writing samples, and all I had written up until that point were short stories, science fiction, those types of things. I hadn't actually written anything literary. So I submitted those naively. Oh my God, I've never been more embarrassed. The guy basically, they didn't even interview me. I go in there and he said, yes, we've read your material and we don't write this kind of stuff, science fiction. So sorry, no. And then just kicked me out. And I was just like, oh my God. I don't think I wrote for a couple of years after that, honestly. And
wait. So this was at UVA, their writing program?
Yeah. Their writing program.
Why would somebody people should be encouraged, right? I don't know. There's some people who believe that there's certain people who just will never be writers. I'm not in that camp. I'm in that camp where if you just grind it out at almost anything, unless you and I aren't going to be NBA players no matter how much we grind it out, but writing, I think as long as if you have good interesting experiences in your life, you have the capability to be.
Look, I don't say this very often, but it's a concept I have. If you look at piano or violin or mathematics, you can get prodigies, child prodigies who are just brilliant. and can get up at age 10 and I don't know enough about music to say what they can play, but where I'm going with this. Recently
we'll say Rachmaninoff, even though I have no idea what that means or how hard it is, but it sounds like I'm smart. This is kind of what journalists do. I'll pretend to be a journalist. Yeah. Like Rachmaninoff is,
Well, hold on. Putin says that's going to be canceled.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, I think recently my theory almost got destroyed because there was a child prodigy writer and who came out and was writing brilliant stuff. Well, it turns out that was all a hoax, that it was some older writer using a younger kid to be the front for this. You know what I mean? It was just all BS. And I think the reason for that is just what you just said. Life experiences play so much into writing that you really, if you want to be a good, solid writer, I think you are drawing from your life experiences. And so on average, I would argue that, people write when they're in their 20s, it happens, but I don't see any 10-year-old prodigy writers. So anyway, I kind of took a couple of years off after getting that response. And keep in mind too, this is the 90s and early 90s. So we didn't even have internet at that point, right? And I was having to submit short stories to magazines. I was having to go to the library and get that big book that had all the listings of who were the
Writers
editors.
Market.
Yeah, Writers Market, and use that to submit. And at the time, I was using a typewriter, so it was a much slower process. I kept at it for 20 years. I kept at it with short stories, and it took me 20 years. Probably I was in my 40s, so yeah, I'd say 20 years before I sold my first short story to a semi-professional market, and then ultimately sold my first book trilogy to Orbit Books. So if you're not willing to put in that kind of time, I would argue maybe go try something else, because it doesn't always take that long, but it can.
Did you try short stories first before you did the novels?
Yeah, and I never had any success. I think the closest thing I got was a personalized rejection letter from Strange Tales back in the. It went out of business for a while, so it was just before it went out of business.
Okay, but you submitted probably hundreds.
Oh yeah,
if not
tons. I used to keep my rejection letters, then I threw them all away. And I would also, during this time, submit to literary magazines as well. So I was doing.
And you actually had more success there, right?
I did. My first pro sale was to a literary online publication that Nick Momitas turned me on to them. And they paid, at the time, the pro rate was 5 cents a word. They paid 5 cents a word.
At least they paid. At least they didn't give you a subscription.
Yeah.
Or make you pay to did they make you pay to submit?
No, it was free. I'm trying to see. The other one that I got into before I think I had success with anyone else was Story Quarterly. Oh, it's showing that backwards, isn't it? Oh well.
No,
anyway.
I see the S. I see the S just fine.
Yeah, Story Quarterly, which is that's an academic kind of one out of Rutgers University. So it's funny how I had better luck with the snobs in kind of academia and in the literary circuit than I did.
Or did they know you had a PhD? Did they know you have a PhD?
I'd have to go back and I don't think I told them about CIA, but I may have mentioned my education.
Okay. Yeah. You're the right. Well, usually though, it's still hard to get into it because they want to see like a pedigreed MFA as well.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I don't think I've watched your episodes yet, but I know you talked about that stuff with Nick. Again, Nick Momitas, for people who are watching. And I fully subscribe to his ideas on all this, where this is partly from my own personal experience, but also when I first started writing and having success, it was due in part because I was taking Nick's advice. And one of the things that I took away, and maybe I got this wrong, but it's what I took away from what he was saying, is MFAs don't really matter all that much.
Not for commercial fiction, right?
Yeah, and I tell my daughter who likes to write, don't go get an MFA. Go get a job as get your degree in biology or chemistry. Go have a career in something else, but keep writing in your spare time. I think that's a far smarter way to go about this. And And in a way, you know what? Plimpton was right when he gave me that advice. Go do something else.
Yeah, I think the founder of Blackstone went to see what was his name? Steven Schwartzman. I think that's
Is that Blackstone is it the hedge fund? Is that right?
It's private equity.
Private equity. Okay.
Yeah, it's like this massive private equity firm. When he went and somebody arranged a meeting with Harriman, like the State Department guy, and he was asking about like what he needed to do to, he had such a successful career. What can I do to get there? And the guy's like, look, there's no way I could have done what I did if my like father didn't become extremely wealthy from like a railroad career. Right. So it's just like, if you're coming from nothing and you want to be successful, like you should go into, something more lucrative like banking or same thing. And then obviously he did, and the rest is history. But there's some sense of that for his generation. Our generation, like, things have been so unstable. Like, look, I went into banking, and I was there in 2008 when the economy almost collapsed.
That would have been brutal.
I went into the military when we hadn't fought any wars, and then we fought 3 wars.
Yeah.
So there's just been a ton of instability. Then we had COVID, right? That was a once in a century event. The last one we had was the equine flu, and now we're kind of getting World War I in reverse.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In a different order. So there's really no one size fits all for this. It's just each story. But anyway, let's get back to you. I'm kind of getting out of focus. So you published these 3 books.
Yep.
How hard was that? How hard was it to find a publisher?
Boy, it was tough. And I'll say, for anyone starting out, if you're watching this, there's a website that I used, and I don't know if it's still around now, but it was absolutely phenomenal, called Absolute Right. I don't know, Sean, if you keep in touch with these kinds of things. I don't know if it's still there.
It might still be there, but I haven't looked at it in years.
Yeah, Absolute, like Absolute Vodka, but it's Absolute Right, WRITE. And I got a lot from that website: how to write a query letter to find an agent. Just the basics, the fundamentals of the business, which is what I was really lacking. The writing I could do, writing the fiction, but the business side of it, I didn't really grasp. And that really helps a lot. Number one, just figuring out the basics of how to get started. So I went through, once I finished my draft novel, it wasn't 3 books, it was 1 book with 3 separate novellas in it. And so I took it to every agent I could find, and I got close calls for maybe 1 or 2 agents. But I ultimately signed with Alex Field, not because he was the last one I went to, right? Of course, the last one you go to who accepts you is going to be the last one. Literally, there was nobody else after Alex to query with this. And the only reason I found him was because of Absolute Right. He popped up there. He wasn't in the normal kind of places where you would find him. He probably is now, but back then he wasn't. And so this is, in case you're watching, this is Alexander Field. He now runs an agency called the Bindery or Bindery. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And you can find him online. But so Alex, put in, and we started working on submittals, and got close calls from like, not Angry Robot. What's the one in the UK? Something Robot.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I can't remember.
Bad Robot? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it is Angry Robot then, because that's actually, I think it is Angry Robot. So we got a couple of close calls, and then eventually I got a phone call from Dong Wang Song at Orbit Books. He's now an agent. Dong Wang is now an agent. But at Orbit Books saying, hey, can we talk? And I said, yeah. I mean, of course, I'm nervous as hell at this point, right? Just totally terrified. And so we started talking about the books, and he was really trying to gauge, how flexible was I? How hard would I be to work with? Because looking back, we never had this discussion, but I think looking back on that first conversation, he had already figured out that he wanted to go with what I had written, but he wanted to see if I was an a-hole, basically. And so that conversation went really well. And he said, well, look, he said the way
it did.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, why? Yeah. Why? Are you
Just
messing with
you.
me?
Of course I'm messing with you.
So he said, about halfway through the conversation, maybe toward the end, he said, listen, the way your book is written right now, it's not quite going to work. What do you think we can do? And I had already been prepared for that answer, because at that point I had started to kind of see through conversations with Alex, I think, or maybe just from my own, that, having 3 novellas that were kind of related, but not, for a novel, for somebody's first novel, was not a great idea. So I said, well, listen, we could turn this into a trilogy, and I'll expand on each one of those 3 sections and make them separate books. And he was like, yes, that's what we're going to do.
he already knew the answer. He just wanted to see if you would come up with it. Right.
Yeah. And so that kind of opened the door. The next was months waiting for contracts, going back and forth. Another thing I'll tell you is that the publishing industry is absolutely slow. Nothing happens immediately, right? I mean, it just creeps along. And probably a year and a half, 2 years, maybe, I can't remember, after we had that conversation, my first book came out, Germline. Germline is the title.
And it was about
and so it was about a kind of near-ish future conflict between America and Russia over natural resources in the Far East, I'd say, in Kazakhstan. Actually, I guess is that Central Asia? Eastern Asia? Yeah.
Central Asia.
Yeah. And so the whole thing takes place underground, consists of an arms race involving genetic modification and genetic kind of creating super soldiers through cloning technology, et cetera. And the experiences that one person, it's written from the view of a reporter who was embedded with American forces, written from his
also addicted to drugs, which is
drug addict, that kind of thing.
No, it's good. It's interesting.
And so a lot of that is honestly, at the time I had just left. When I started writing that, I had been away. I had left the CIA and been away for about 4 or 5 years. And so I won't say that the book is autobiographical, but I will say that there's stuff when it talks about the main character is Oscar. When it talks about Oscar's reaction to war and things he experiences and sees, and talking about being a spectator, on war, a lot of that stuff was drawn from my experiences that I can't talk about. That book had to be scrubbed by CIA reviewers to make sure that nothing classified was in there.
I was about to ask you that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I think we have very limited time right now. So after those 3 books, what did you do next?
Right. So after those 3 books, I kind of, I had gotten a view on big publishing at that point and realized that I didn't want to be tied to that anymore, to be honest. And I'm not just saying that because I'm not with a major publisher anymore. I literally had experiences where I was being told, you can't tweet that, you can't say this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I that does not sit well with me. You can't say that kind of crap to me. So I had, I wound up, at the time I had moved to another agent and was getting the same or similar kind of stuff from that agent. So I wound up firing that agent and going back to Alex and essentially mutually agreeing with Orbit that my future science fiction wasn't going to be published with them.
Yeah, I'll just inject really quick. There was one. I'm not going to say their name, but one person that I've interviewed on this show who has done very extremely well with one of his books. He was trying to pitch another book, maybe I think on the fiction side, to his agent, and his agent said something to the effect of, "Oh, well, right now I'm only presenting books by POCs, people of color.
Yeah, yeah. And look, that's the industry has decided to go in that direction. They're private companies; they can do what they want. But the writing was on the wall. I saw it. That I was kind of look, the kinds of things I was seeing. This one agent that I fired, the things I was seeing come out on their Twitter feed. I realized, oh, I'm not getting any representation from these people, because I am in a particular, not demographic, but it could have been political view, whatever. I was not somebody that this agency liked or wanted, and so it was very disturbing in a way.
This is my concern for the entire industry and for the country in general. So Stephen Barnes, who is in Weird World War IV, he's a great science fiction author. He has this theory, and I'm just going to repeat it, and I'm probably not going to do great justice to it, but I, on the whole, agree with it. The left and right each have very valuable functions for society. The left is the part of society that exposes the country to risk, injects change into society, much of it for the better. Now, some of this change is, for the worse, and I'm not going to get into semantics about what that is, because it's all opinion, etc. The function of the right is stability. And when, the right's role is to put a governor on this change so that the change is happens in a more modulated form, so that things don't fall apart from the excessive instability. If you change too fast, things will collapse. For the same reason that if you are too repressive and install order to such an extent that you ossify the social structures to the point that they collapse from the sheer weight of that. But both the left and right have critical roles. When you remove one or the other from a conversation, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
because you're going to have people who aren't talking to each other. And the same thing with when you censor people, when you censor language. My view is, for the same reason I lost my rocker about not being able to access the Kremlin's website on the last episode. What happens is if you don't allow people to vent in public, you're going to allow those views to metastasize, especially bad views or views that aren't helpful. Whereas if you allow that debate to happen under the light of the sun and the light of day, bad ideas will die. They will collapse on their own merits. But in darkness, bad ideas metastasize.
Yeah.
And you also don't get early warnings. Like, bad things just happen because you can't monitor it on social media. You can't see it coming. So anyway, that's just my general philosophy on these things.
No, I agree with it. And I honestly, I don't have the data to back up what I'm about to say, but I can imagine that it plays a role in terms of when you're so skewed to one side in publishing,
or the military, for that matter, right?
Yeah, any entertainment.
Like, people should be terrified that the military is like skewed to the right.
Yeah,
right.
You're going to exclude 50% of your audience.
Yep.
50% of the people, quite frankly, don't want to see message fiction about whatever. Pick your radical left topic.
And by the way, message fiction is fine. Just like, A, don't mandate that it has to be message fiction. And B, if you're open to message fiction, you should be open to message fiction from both sides.
Well,
right?
and that's what I'm getting at is it is mandated. It's almost like a requirement now. And so you wind up with, I'm not going to get into this. This is the whole, we could go for an hour, but it's,
but just as long as we keep it to general principles and don't point to any specific, because this happens in every aspect of American life. Like, I've seen it on the right, where, like, I generally am a principles-based person.
Yeah.
Right. You set up a principle and then people abide by that principle. But when I see things violated, like, I mean, again, I don't want to go too much into this, but like the Biden laptop story.
Yeah.
Like, like like when I see it reported in the New York Times and Washington Post, I'm like, guys, you knew about this for 2 years.
Yeah, they should really be punished for that.
I mean, you can't punish them, but like,
but what
it's just an example of like why they have such a lack of credibility.
And what I was going to say is, and this is where I think it's where I'm off base, to be blunt, but the thought pops into my head. Oh, well, that really explains, as a writer, perhaps that kind of skewed vision does play a role with the fact that we're seeing, the big six, now it's the big five. When is it going to be the big four in publishing? Well, of course, there are all sorts of market forces at play there that have nothing to do with what kind of fiction they're publishing.
Well, no, it actually may have that, because
but what I was going to say is,
if your sales go down,
you're going to be bought.
You're going to get acquired, right?
Yeah. And so, what I was going to finish up with is, it couldn't hurt to put good fiction, good writing at the top of your requirements list to help combat that.
So to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
In this hyper partisan environment, we talked earlier, at least in the prior episode, where 5% of voices are 80% of the noise.
Yeah.
So, like, to defend traditional publishing, they have to be very careful what they choose to publish, because they could have a mob impact on and
that is
lawsuits
certainly,
and things like that.
That is
afraid.
That is certainly one consideration.
Fear is driving a huge portion of this.
You can believe what I'm about to say or not, because it's anecdotal, it's personal experience, and I'm not going to give names. Having seen it from the inside, it's not just fear. Is it power? I don't even know what word to use. It's ideology, dude. It's you've got true believers in there, man. It's not just fear of reprisal.
All right. So other books that you have. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
We got to cut this off soon. It's already, we're 5 minutes over. Right?
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I got to get going. So my last two books that I've put out are with Baen Books, who I love. Baen Books is a great publisher. They publish left, right. They publish the whole spectrum. And politics is kind of, it's not even a consideration with them. I don't get phone calls,
weird World War IV, which you have a story in.
Yep.
There are stories that will make people on the right cringe, and there are stories that will make people on the left cringe.
And that's the way it should be. I am
so proud of that. I'm so proud that I was able to do that.
That is the way it should be. And Baen is the last bastion of publishing, I think. The last kind of oasis for people like me, because once you get away from Baen, now you're talking about small publishers. And Baen, I would say, is a mid-sized publisher. They're not one of the big ones, but they're also not a micro press or anything like that. They're pretty well known in the industry. Maybe on a par with Tor. I don't know. That would be a whole nother topic of conversation. But Baen, if anything happens to Baen, I think a lot of people are going to be in trouble. And I hope it continues to work as well as it has. But I have two books with them now, not to mention all the anthologies of yours that I've been in. And Tyger Bright and Tyger Burning are two books in a kind of far future alien invasion, really entertaining, these are not literary works. These are meant to be completely entertaining reads for people who enjoy pew science fiction with lots of aliens and lots of kind of intrigue and political machinations, etc. So I would strongly encourage people to check out those books from Baen if they have a minute. And I think your last anthology, Weird World War IV, you talked about in on that show you were on. Why am I drawing a blank? Coast to Coast. And so that must have gotten a big spike with sales. Although I know you were probably talking about your most recent one that's going to be coming out next. But
yeah, it actually pushed it on the Amazon new releases for short stories to number 3, just behind. Actually, yeah, we can't really talk about this, but you'll laugh. So the first one you're not going to laugh at. First one was like a Star Wars anthology, and then the second one, number 2, was an S.A. Covey Expanse anthology.
Wait, say that again. A what anthology?
The Expanse.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they were doing those anthologies.
I think it's an anthology. It was under short story anthology, so it has to be an anthology. And it was one ahead of Janelle Monáe, the actress. She has like some anthology or something like that. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, it certainly helped. Speaking of which, it is April 3rd, my friend, and you had a deadline for April 1st.
Oh my God.
All right. I have more time on this one. I shouldn't say this publicly, but I have a little bit more time. But
I totally forgot about that with all the things that have been going on, Sean. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just I got you. You'll be in there. You'll be in there. For folks like that don't know, that we're working on another anthology called Weird World War III. So Weird World War III China, to be very clear. And as we know, TC loves the Chinese government. Xi is his favorite politician of all time. Better read than dead, all that good stuff. Anything else you want to tell new writers before I made you 25 minutes late?
No. I think that about covers it, but I appreciate it. Appreciate being on.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Always a pleasure. See you soon.
Thanks, Sean. All right.
If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.